The silence before the storm is always the most dangerous moment, when predators mistake stillness for weakness, never realizing they're staring into the eyes of someone who has learned to weaponize their pain. Sofia Martinez had survived 3 different schools in 2 years, each one leaving invisible scars that taught her valuable lessons about human nature. Now, standing before the imposing brick facade of Riverside Academy, she felt the familiar weight of anxiety settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. The September morning air carried the scent of fresh paint and possibility, but Sofia knew better than to trust first impressions. Schools were ecosystems, and in every ecosystem there were predators. Her black combat boots clicked against the concrete steps as she climbed toward the main entrance, her worn leather jacket providing a thin barrier between her and the world. Students clustered around the entrance like territorial animals, their conversations creating a wall of noise that seemed designed to exclude outsiders. Sofia's dark eyes swept across their faces, cataloging expressions, identifying potential threats with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned survival the hard way. The hallways of Riverside Academy stretched before her like arteries in some massive organism, pulsing with the energy of 1,000 teenagers navigating their own personal dramas. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made every face look angular and predatory. The walls were lined with motivational posters featuring stock photos of diverse students smiling with manufactured enthusiasm, their messages about kindness and inclusion feeling like cruel jokes in this environment. Sofia's first class was advanced chemistry, and she slipped into the back row with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to making themselves invisible. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes, barely glanced at the attendance sheet as she called names. When she reached Sofia Martinez, Sofia raised her hand slightly, just enough to be acknowledged without drawing attention. The morning passed in a blur of introductions, syllabi, and the peculiar dance of teenagers establishing social hierarchies. Sofia observed it all with detached interest, noting how quickly alliances formed, how ruthlessly outliers were identified and marked for exclusion. She recognized the patterns because she had lived them before, in Phoenix, in Denver, in Sacramento. The faces changed, but the cruelty remained remarkably consistent. By the time lunch arrived, Sofia had already identified the key players in Riverside Academy's social ecosystem. There were the popular kids, beautiful and cruel in equal measure, who commanded respect through fear and social manipulation. There were the athletes, whose physical dominance translated into social currency. There were the academics, who survived by being useful to those in power. And then there were the outcasts, the broken ones, the targets. The cafeteria at Riverside Academy was a theater of teenage cruelty, its round tables arranged like coliseums where daily battles for social supremacy played out over processed food and chocolate milk. The air hummed with conversations punctuated by laughter that often carried undertones of malice. Sofia collected her tray methodically, selecting a turkey sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water with the same careful consideration a soldier might use when choosing weapons. She found an empty table near the windows, where natural light softened the harsh fluorescence and provided a clear view of most of the cafeteria. It was a strategic position, one that allowed her to monitor potential threats while appearing casual and unaware. She unwrapped her sandwich slowly, taking small bites, while her eyes continuously scanned the room. That's when she noticed them. 3 boys sat at a central table like kings holding court, their presence commanding attention from everyone around them. The leader was immediately recognizable by the way others gravitated toward him, by the confident sprawl of his posture, by the calculating gleam in his pale blue eyes. Derek Walsh was tall and lean, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of chiseled features that suggested good genetics and better dental care. His smile was weapons-grade charm, but Sophia could see the cruelty lurking beneath its polished surface. To his right sat Trevor Kim, shorter and stockier, with dark hair and the eager expression of a lieutenant, desperate to prove his loyalty. He laughed too loudly at Derek's jokes, and his eyes constantly sought approval. The classic behavior of someone who had clawed his way into the inner circle and lived in constant fear of being expelled from it. The third member of their unholy trinity was Brandon Foster, red-haired and freckled, with the nervous energy of someone perpetually on the edge of violence. His fingers drummed constantly against the table, and his eyes darted around the room like a predator searching for wounded prey. Where Derek was calculated cruelty and Trevor was desperate cruelty, Brandon was pure chaotic malice. Sophia watched them with professional interest, noting how other students reacted to their presence. Some approached with offerings of food or gossip, tributes to ensure their own safety. Others carefully avoided making eye contact, understanding instinctively that attention from these three rarely ended well. A few brave souls sat at nearby tables, close enough to bask in reflected popularity, but far enough away to maintain plausible deniability when the inevitable cruelty began. She was so focused on her observations that she almost missed the moment when Derek's attention turned toward her. His eyes locked onto hers across the cafeteria, and Sophia felt the familiar ice-cold recognition that every prey animal experiences when noticed by a predator. Derek's smile widened, not with warmth, but with the anticipation of someone who had just spotted their next source of entertainment. He leaned toward his companions, whispering something that made Trevor giggle nervously and caused Brandon's drumming fingers to still completely. Sophia forced herself to look away, to continue eating her sandwich as if nothing had happened, but she could feel their attention like heat from a fire. Every survival instinct she had developed over years of being the new girl, the outsider, the target, began screaming warnings. She calculated distances to exits, identified potential weapons within reach, and began the mental preparation that she had hoped never to need again. The attack came sooner than she expected. Derek approached with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. His two companions flanked him like an honor guard, their sneakers squeaking against the polished linoleum as they crossed the cafeteria. Conversations died in their wake, replaced by the electric silence that precedes violence. "Well, well," Derek said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "Looks like we have fresh meat." He slid into the chair across from Sophia without invitation, his movements fluid and predatory. Trevor and Brandon took positions on either side of her table, creating a triangle that trapped her effectively while maintaining the illusion of casual conversation. "I'm Derek," he continued, extending a hand with mock politeness. "Welcome to Riverside Academy. I like to personally greet all our new students, make sure they understand how things work around here." Sophia looked at the offered hand, but didn't take it. She had learned long ago that accepting such gestures was often the first step toward becoming someone's victim. Instead, she continued eating her sandwich, chewing slowly and deliberately while maintaining eye contact. The rejection clearly caught Derek off guard. His smile faltered for just a moment, revealing a flash of genuine irritation before the mask of charm snapped back into place. Trevor and Brandon exchanged glances, uncertain how to interpret this deviation from their usual script. "Not much of a talker, are you?" Derek said, leaning back in his chair with practiced nonchalance. "That's okay. I like the strong, silent type, very mysterious." His tone remained conversational, but Sophia could hear the underlying threat. She had encountered dozens of Dereks over the years, boys who used charm as a weapon and social pressure as a tool of control. They followed predictable patterns, escalating their aggression when their initial attempts at dominance failed. You know, Derek continued, there are certain traditions here at Riverside, ways we help new students integrate into our community. Think of it as a welcoming committee. Trevor snickered at this, earning an approving nod from his leader. Brandon's fingers had resumed their drumming, faster now, more agitated. Sophia finished her sandwich and carefully wiped her hands on her napkin, her movements precise and unhurried. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, cutting through the cafeteria's tension like a blade. I'm not interested in your traditions. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Around the cafeteria, other students leaned forward slightly, sensing that something significant was happening. Some pulled out their phones, ready to document whatever came next for social media immortality. Derek's mask of charm finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. His pale eyes hardened, and when he smiled now, it was with the anticipation of someone about to inflict pain. See, that's where you're wrong, sweetheart, he said, the endearment dripping with condescension. Everyone's interested in our traditions. Eventually. He reached across the table suddenly, his fingers tangling in Sophia's long black hair with practiced cruelty. The motion was swift and brutal, designed to catch her off guard and establish his physical dominance in front of their audience. But Sophia Martinez was not like the other girls Derek had terrorized. The moment his hand touched her hair, something fundamental shifted in the atmosphere around their table. The change was subtle but unmistakable, like the pressure drop that precedes a storm or the sudden stillness that comes before an earthquake. Sophia's dark eyes didn't widen with fear or fill with tears as Derek expected. Instead, they became completely calm, utterly still, like the surface of a deep lake that conceals dangerous currents beneath. Her body language shifted almost imperceptibly, muscles coiling with controlled tension. "Let go," she said quietly, her voice carrying an undertone that made Trevor step back instinctively. Derek laughed, the sound harsh and ugly in the cafeteria's silence. He tightened his grip on her hair, yanking hard enough to force her head back at an uncomfortable angle. "Or what?" he taunted. "You'll tell the principal? You'll call your mommy. Face it, sweetheart, you're in my world now, and in my world—" He never finished the sentence. Sophia's right hand moved with lightning speed, her fingers wrapping around Derek's wrist with surgical precision. Her grip found the exact pressure points that martial arts masters spend years learning to identify, and she applied force with the calculated efficiency of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life. The technique she used was called kotegaeshi in Aikido, a wrist throw that redirects an attacker's energy against them. But Sophia's execution was modified, enhanced by years of studying multiple martial arts disciplines and tempered by the kind of focused rage that only comes from being pushed too far, too many times. Derek's scream cut through the cafeteria like a siren, high and desperate and utterly unlike anything that had ever emerged from his throat before. The sound was pain, made audible, shock given voice, and it froze everyone in the room like a photograph. Sophia rose from her chair with fluid grace, her grip never loosening as she continued the technique's natural progression. Derek's body followed the path of least resistance, his knees hitting the floor with a sound like breaking wood. His face contorted with agony as his wrist bent in ways that violated basic anatomy. The crack when his wrist finally snapped was audible throughout the cafeteria, a sharp report that seemed to echo off the walls. Derek's scream reached a new octave, desperate and primal, the cry of someone experiencing true helplessness for the first time in his life. Trevor and Brandon stood frozen, their mouths hanging open as they watched their invincible leader reduced to a sobbing wreck on the cafeteria floor. The entire ecosystem of Riverside Academy had been turned upside down in less than 10 seconds, and none of them knew how to process what they were witnessing. Sophia maintained her grip for another moment, her eyes scanning the room to ensure everyone understood the lesson being taught. When she finally released Derek's wrist, he collapsed completely, cradling his broken limb against his chest, while tears streamed down his face. The silence that followed was profound and electric, charged with the kind of energy that changes everything. Students who had been cowering in fear moments before now stared at Sophia with something approaching awe. The social order of Riverside Academy had just experienced a seismic shift, and everyone present knew they were witnessing history. Sophia adjusted her backpack strap with the same casual precision she had used to destroy Derek's wrist. Her breathing remained steady, her pulse normal, as if breaking bones was simply another item on her daily to-do list. She looked down at Derek with something that might have been pity, then let her gaze sweep across Trevor and Brandon. "Your tradition is over," she said quietly, her words carrying to every corner of the silent cafeteria. She walked toward the exit with unhurried steps, her combat boots clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Students parted before her like waves, creating a clear path toward the doors. Some stared with fear, others with admiration, but all watched with the recognition that they had just witnessed the birth of a legend. Behind her, Derek continued to sob on the floor, while teachers finally began rushing toward the scene. But Sophia knew that the real damage had already been done. The story of what happened in the Riverside Academy cafeteria would spread through the school like wildfire, growing more elaborate with each retelling until it achieved the status of myth. As she pushed through the cafeteria doors, Sophia allowed herself a small smile. She had never wanted to be the girl who broke bones and shattered social hierarchies, but sometimes the world forces such choices upon us. Sometimes the only way to stop being prey is to become the predator. The hallways of Riverside Academy seemed different now, less threatening, and more like what they had always been, just corridors in a building where teenagers played their games of dominance and submission. But now those games had new rules, and everyone would have to learn them. For the first time in 3 schools and countless encounters with bullies, Sophia Martinez had found her peace. Not through submission or avoidance, but through the simple expedient of demonstrating that some storms are too dangerous to provoke. The legend of what happened that day would follow her through the rest of her time at Riverside Academy, but it would be a different kind of attention than she was used to receiving. Instead of the predatory focus of bullies seeking easy targets, she would now command the wary respect of those who understood that beneath her quiet exterior lay something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And in the cafeteria behind her, as teachers helped Derek to his feet and began the process of calling paramedics and parents and administrators, a new understanding began to take hold. Riverside Academy would never again be quite the same place it had been that morning, because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to fight back to change everything. The storm had arrived at Riverside Academy, and her name was Sophia Martinez.